loss of capability, flat spot, and then increase in capability. And what happens is our adversaries look at that flat spot and they go, wow, there's our opportunity. Instead, what we have to say is, here's a transition. How do we have, as we retire older systems and bring into place newer systems, how do we make sure that those lines converge very, very quickly? That's going to be key also going forward. Those are going to be difficult decisions. Our biggest challenge in the months and years ahead is this: balancing the current demand signal for readiness generation and devoting resources for modernization. That, I believe, is going to be the key, and we have to make sure that we get that done and get that done properly. There's always going to be a tension between the combatant commanders and the service branch chiefs on where we devote resources. And we're going to have some heart-to-heart discussions in Congress about how do we make sure the proper balance is there. And the folks within the Pentagon are going to have to really make some tough decisions about how do we balance the risk that we take on today in order to mitigate additional risks that we may face in the future. There's going to be difficult decisions, and we are not going to operate in a zero-risk environment. But if we don't make the proper investments and make the right decisions in a very dynamic environment that literally changes on a day-to-day basis, then we won't have what we need to make sure that, if called upon, we can fight to victory. But we want to make sure, too, we have the capability to deter conflict, because history teaches us a very specific lesson. If we don't do that, the ultimate outcome is conflict. So, folks, thanks again. I really appreciate the opportunity. Look forward to your questions.
Well done.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, indeed. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
The one thing that I had to cut out of my introduction, I abandoned everything, but let me not be a poor host. A huge thank you, Dr. LaPlante, for coming down, flying down tonight to co-host this morning. So please, delighted to have you in the house, sir.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Congressman Wittman. That was
Thank you.
Excellent.
Well done, sir.
We're talking about the trades between readiness, modernization, and frankly, capability.
Yes.
There's not an easy answer to that, and it has to be thoughtful. We're going to start off with a question from John Roberti from Cubic. John, did you want to pose your question to the Congressman?
Good morning, Congressman. John Roberti with Cubic. How are you today?
Hey, good morning, John.
I'm sure on your position on HASC, you've heard of the pressing need for greater threat realism to support warfighter training, and you understand the need for live virtual constructive training capability in order to train for the high-end fight that you just so aptly described. Do you feel the services are translating this urgency for realistic training environments into properly funded LVC solutions that are needed today to train like we fight? And how will you ensure DoD fields these joint interoperable live virtual constructive training capabilities without delay?
Well, John, I think the service branches need to do much more. Listen, they've gotten some of these pieces right. You know, the LCS training is incredibly effective. I've been to the simulator there, very, very effective, to make sure, though, that we do the training in what I call the high-intensity environment, to make sure that the simulation, and you know, live virtual simulation today is incredibly, incredibly effective. But what we want to make sure is that we have that integration, and the integration is this. As we look at sensors, as we look at our systems now being able to take in lots more data, lots more information on what's going on, and then using the ability of artificial intelligence to process that data and to give to our commanders out there the ability to make decisions, we want to make sure that they've been trained through those high-intensity scenarios to make sure that they understand what's it like to go through a situation where they have multiple threats. What's it like to see an engagement with a live aircraft? I think those things are incredibly important. They can accelerate training. They can make us much more effective as a fighting force. And they can make sure, too, that we've been through situations that otherwise could end up with bad outcomes in the virtual sense, where we learn instead of having a bad outcome in a live situation. So I believe that live virtual training is an incredibly important part of that. It holds massive amounts of capability and opportunities. I want to make sure that we get those things done.
Yeah, I would just add to the Congressman's comment that there's a lot of us that believe a second training revolution is happening now, with the first being in the 1970s, with the technology the Congressman mentions. So thank you. We have our next questions from John Lehman from Fincantory. John?
Good morning, Congressman. I have a question regarding advocacy for American sea power, but I'd first like to take the opportunity to thank you and your partner in crime, Rep. Courtney, for your absolutely strong leadership in arguing for a strong Navy. It's very much needed, so thank you.
Thank you, John.
As a former Navy officer and an avowed navalist, I've been frustrated by the lack of consistent and coherent messaging from the Navy on the critical importance of American sea power for our nation's security and economic well-being. As I see it, it's a bit of partially one of substance of the message and partially one of who exactly is delivering the message. So in your opinion, who should be the primary advocate for the critical importance of American sea power to global security and U.S. economy?
Sure.
How should they be making that case to the American people? And when I say the American people, I don't mean just the folks, those of us in the D.C. crowd who are focused on these issues. And what is Congress's proper role in that advocacy effort?
Absolutely. Well, John, I think it needs to be what I call the choir effect, and that means Congress needs to be talking about the things that must happen. We want to make sure too that the Pentagon is part of that. The Secretary of the Navy is part of that. When people hear a consistent message across the spectrum, from the legislative branch, from the executive branch, from the Pentagon, then they start to get it and they say, well, everybody's in agreement. This must be something that's very important. And it has to be more than just the number of ships. And listen, that's a very effective message when you say that we need 355 ships or we need 400 ships. But the key is why do we need that? And how do we put that in simple terms? How do we capture that in 30 seconds or less? I want people to be able to understand that instinctually and go, yeah, that makes sense to me. I don't have to understand what types of ships are out there or why 400 or 355 or whatever is an important number. We have to do a better job of that. And I say we, that being the Pentagon, that being the Navy, that being the Secretary of the Navy, that being Congress, to make sure we're all on the same page to do that. And we have to be able to communicate that, not just along the lines of the Navy Marine Corps team, but we have to communicate that along the lines of what it's going to take to make sure that we do the proper job to defend this nation. And we don't have to get into the nuts and bolts. I mean, I like all the policy machinations of it, but we have to be able to express to the American people why this is important and why the capability of the United States to counter its adversaries is what maintains peace. It's what deters aggressive action by others. And I think people instinctually understand that, especially as people are beginning to understand more and more about the aggressive behavior of China and what it means to the United States.
Thank you. Our next question is from Megan Eckstein from USNI. Megan?
Hi, good morning, Mr. Wittman. Thank you so much for doing this today.
Good morning, Megan.
Hi, I wanted to ask more about the transition plan that you laid out and trying to minimize sort of any dip in naval capability. Obviously, that costs more than the Navy just divesting its legacy gear up front and then taking its time developing and purchasing replacements. So I wonder, to help fund that, is there anything else that the Navy spends its money on, any, side tasks that it has that you think the Navy should kind of de-emphasize in the short term? Or if not, is there anything else within DoD where maybe you'd say, money spent on other items should be shifted towards the Navy to help cover this transition plan?
Well, Megan, that's something that's absolutely going to happen. I know that the Navy, as well as the other service branches, have gone through the process of what's called a scrub, or what they call a scrub, scrubbing the budget, trying to find places where there's duplication of services, trying to find areas where things are being done, and they have to question, do we really need to continue to do those things? All the service branches are going to have to find savings within their own budgets and be able to take those dollars and plow them back into modernization. That's the way you're going to be able to move the curve to the left of building new capability and to be able to properly transition in taking out legacy systems. So they are going to have to do their job. Listen, Congress has to make sure that we provide that level funding plus a factor of inflation. And if we do anything less than that, then that erodes the capability to rebuild and modernize. But the service branches also need to go top to bottom and be really, really self-reflective on that and be self-critical and say, are these things that we really need to do? Are these things that really add to the mission? Are these things that add capability? Are these things that we absolutely have to do? Right. And then take those dollars and plow them back into the things that we see need to happen. Again, I go back to this. This is going to have to be a team approach. Congress has to do its part. The Navy Marine Corps team has to do its part. The Pentagon has to do its part. The Secretary of Defense has to do his part. All of those things have to happen. And listen, I believe that they will. We're seeing signs of those things happening, and that's the path forward.
Next, we have Richard Abbott with a question from Defense Daily. Richard?
Hello, thank you very much. How optimistic are you that the PSYOP will be funded sooner than planned, including maybe by the current infrastructure bill, by incorporating something like the Shipyard Act?
Well, I think it's critical that the PSYOPs plan be funded. I put in a bill, as well as Senator Wicker on the Senate side, called the Shipyard Act, which devotes $25 billion for the modernization of our shipyards. $21 billion to the private yards, $4 billion in essence to the, $21 billion to the public yards, $4 billion to the private yards. That's the type of reinvestment that we need, and it has to be on an accelerated pace. The current PSYOPs plan that says 20 years to modernize the shipyards is just unacceptable. And if we don't devote those resources, and if we don't do so quickly, we will not have the capability we need to maintain the Navy that this nation must have in order to deter our adversaries. So the Shipyard Act allows that to happen. We're going to be looking at every opportunity to make sure that we get that in whatever mechanism is best going forward. There's been a lot of discussion about infrastructure. There most likely will be some kind of infrastructure plan moving forward. We believe firmly that this would be a critical part of whatever infrastructure plan goes forward. I believe it's completely appropriate to invest in our public shipyards. They are an incredibly important part of our capability going forward. It's not just shipbuilding, but it's the ship maintenance element that's also important.
Thank you, Congressman. Next question is from Aiden Quigley from Inside Defense. Aiden?
Hi, thank you for doing this. So my question is on unmanned systems.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering, what do you think the Navy should be doing to increase congressional confidence in, its unmanned systems acquisition?
Well, Aiden, unmanned systems are going to be an incredibly important part of the Navy force structure going forward. The key, though, is to make sure that these unmanned systems are intensively tested, intensively managed, to make sure that they are an important part of the fleet going forward. I think that has to happen. But we want to make sure we get it right. We don't want to have another LCS or another DDG 1000 where we spend a lot of money and then we find the capabilities aren't there. So let's get it right to begin with before we go into serial production.
Sir, as a terrible host, I realized we kept Congressman Brown on the line for a couple minutes here. I apologize. We have an A. Brown on the phone. I'm assuming that's Congressman Brown.
Yeah.
Sir, any last thoughts that are critical to the audience that are actionable today?
Well, I think the most important thing is that it is going to be a challenge for all of us going forward to make sure we have what we need to deter our adversaries and to make sure we defend the interests of the United States. The way we do that is to make sure that we get more out of our resources than our adversaries get out of their resources. There's not going to be massive increases in the top line. So we have to get more per our dollar than the Russians get per their ruble or the Chinese get per their yuan. We can do that. We're the best innovators and creators in the world. Let's do more there. Let's make sure we protect what we invest in to make sure the Chinese and Russians don't steal it. But let's make sure we are the most effective, the most efficient nation in building military capability to deter our adversaries and to maintain peace.
Well done, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.